It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! It's Feedback Friday. And this is one of the Feedback Fridays I approach with trepidation because I have to address misunderstandings. And fortunately, in this case, and this is so rare that I actually predict where the misunderstanding is coming from. In one case, in the other case, caught me completely off guard. So I'm going to deal with two videos this week. One was one I expected to be contentious because it's part of my, History of Feminism Gamers, my Gamers Guide to Feminism series. And it was about, Rosie the Riveter and the social programming, the gendered social programming that we deal with. And it launched into a lot of people getting mad at me. At one point, somebody told me to stop being a coward because I talked about the Master Chief takeover ads in mirror takeover ads in the washroom. And this is a really easy thing to put to bed. I never said that we were afraid of it. We joked about it. We laughed about it because it was so tone deaf. The idea that they put a male character looking at you wash your hands in the woman's washroom is not a question of fear. It's a question of who approved this marketing. It became this joke because it is sort of like, it couldn't have been Cortana. Like, it had to be Chief. Like, you couldn't put Cortana in this or any female. Oh, right, wait. There aren't any other recognizable female characters. And you sons of bitches killed Cortana, allegedly, in Halo 4. And so you couldn't use it to market Halo 5. But, that this is a marketing problem. It didn't have to be Master Chief. It could have been Lara freaking Croft marketing Xbox last year. And so the point was not that anybody was afraid, person who told me to stop being a coward. It's that the marketing didn't work. It seemed silly. It was ridiculous. And I never said that made us afraid. I said it's a symbol that the conference is sending us that it's not for them. Was I momentarily freaked out in my hotel room when I thought I saw someone standing in my bathroom out of the corner of my eye? Yes, it was a momentary, which is a natural self-defense reaction when you go into a dark room and you think you see somebody standing over your corner. You see somebody standing in your room. That is natural. That is understandable. But no, I wasn't freaked out by a Master Chief ad in a well-lit washroom. That's ridiculous to even assume. But another debate broke out, which was very strange. Two parts. One was the thing about me talking about the situations at E3 that say very different things to men and women, involving a lack of after-hours transportation while the conference damn well knows parties are still going on. And a lot of tangents came out of that. And what's interesting is, one, that people started saying the transportation shouldn't just be for women. Transportation should be for everyone. If you go back and watch the video, you will hear me say a savvy marketing company will provide after-hours transportation for everyone. I flat out said that. And I think it's interesting that people are so trained to treat that as a dog whistle, to knee-jerk on that people miss that. People miss that I was actually advocating for transportation for everyone. And the reason I advocate for transportation for everyone is the second part of this disagreement that I find interesting, because it's the same statistics and I'm getting completely different opinions based on it than the angry commenters. And it is the statistic that a man walking alone is 2 times more likely to be assaulted in Los Angeles than a woman. And, that's a statistic. It is. there's a lot into that statistic. One is, where are the men walking alone? Are men walking alone in more dangerous neighborhoods? Are more men putting themselves in dangerous situations than women? Social programming would imply yes. So, it's not that in my what the people citing that statistic are saying is that women should stop being damn afraid and go walk outside. Well, why the hell should we do that if the men who are doing it are getting beat up? Isn't that an indication that the social programming sent to women is right, that it's a dangerous situation, that men shouldn't be doing it? And why are we socially programming men to take dangerous risks, to take silly risks? The solution is not to say, well, men take dumb risks, so you should too, ladies. The solution is to recognize that there is a risk to all attendees and start, stop organizing a conference based on normalized male behaviors and start organizing the conference based on sense and provide that transportation after hours, because people are navigating the city after hours. And I'm not talking a quick walk, from the Staples Center to, if people don't know, the convention center. The convention center is in this very touristy part of town. And it's, in that neighborhood, everything is very well lit and there's cops all over the place because it's where the Lakers and the Kings games happen too. And so there is no problem walking around that neighborhood. Like if you stick to there, it's a tourist zone, right? Now the problem with LA is that the tourist zones are right abutting areas that aren't tourist zones. And the minute you step out of those tourist zones, then you're in the big bad streets of LA, right? And the Los Angeles Convention Center is on the boundary of, South Central. Well, it used to be called South Central. But also Little Tokyo. And, it's not in the best part of town. They put it there to try to push the problems away. That's what they do with structures like that. They're trying to reclaim the neighborhood, which means just not addressing your poverty problem. It's just pushing your poverty problem around. And sorry guys, I'm having some breathing issues, so if I'm not enunciating, I realized I said like poverty. I said poverty. I have a bit of post-nasal drip going on, and so sometimes I on words lately. But I think that this statistic that, a man is twice as likely to be assaulted in LA walking alone than a woman, it is an indication that, maybe LA isn't the safest city to have nerds walking around at night, especially since a lot of these nerds aren't from around there and they scream tourist. And, I think that makes my point stronger, that the realities of this conference are that we need shuttle service after hours, and it can operate exactly the same. Now, like I said, I'm not saying the conference necessarily has to be the one to do it. This is a marketing opportunity for a game company. I mean, they have the Plants vs. Zombies bus anyway. Why not use it? Why not use it to actually shuttle people around? I don't even know what those buses do. They sit them and they park them there. And, maybe there are solutions that don't involve making the conference more expensive. Although, let's face it, that conference makes money hand over fist. So I really think that they can provide 2 hours of extra shuttle service. And saying that, will men deal with danger, so women should have to deal with it too. This is precisely what I'm talking about by saying that business activities are socialized surrounding male comfort and male expectations. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're accurate or the best expectations. The solution here is not asking everybody to do equally dangerous stuff. The idea is, well, if it's not safe for women, well, maybe it's not safe for men either. We're not talking about Navy SEALs here, right? We're talking about video game nerds. And so I agree that I said from the beginning, it should be for everyone. I think that this issue that women are sort of going, oh, is an indication that, yeah, it's not a safe circumstance. and nobody should be doing it. Like, common sense should prevail here. And for people who like, why can't you just take your own damn taxi? Well, that's fine for, you know, the Microsoft employees and the PlayStation employees and people working on expense accounts. But for the journalists that travel down there, a lot of people are doing it on a real shoestring, because E3 is one of those shows that you end up eating a loss on to make those contacts, because everybody's doing media for E3. A lot of it is reconnaissance, so that you know what's coming up for the coming year, and you actually get some hands-on, and it allows you to make contact with some smaller publishers that you may not know about, and it allows you to sort of make face-to-face so they know who you are. That doesn't always work. EA, I'm looking at you. I can shake someone's hand and then they never return my phone calls. But, you know, it certainly warmed up my relationship with Activision to be there and for them to see the enthusiasm, and it definitely made things better that way. But I mean, I made a contact with Versus Evil last year that's been great. And that was because a viewer was really hot on a Kickstarter game they were publishing. And so I went to check it out on behalf of somebody who really wanted more information on Skyshine's Bedlam. And it turned out that they have like Afro Samurai and all these things. And they just have some interesting mid-tier games. And it was a really, really good contact. But that was on the show floor, and they happen to have an open booth. There's other people who aren't there, and they're on their guard there. When you can get together with somebody after hours and just sit down for a drink and talk as people, you know, you're not on that 15-minute appointment schedule. It's very different, and it's very, very important. And I think that if it's true, and if there is a safety concern for men, we have to start thinking about how this conference is run. Because, like I said, the journalists are not, you know, they don't have the budgets for this stuff. And for those of you who don't know, journalism at E3, you usually get, you know, in the smaller services. I'm not talking about the big ones. No, the big sites, they do pay for their staff. But the smaller sites, meaning, you know, the vast majority of gaming sites, you get accreditation through your outlet. They do not pay your way down. You are paying that out of your own pocket. And so that idea, if you end up in that Universal City block, which you normally end up in because they dicked you around on accreditation and you didn't get in right when housing opened, it's a good 35 to 45 minute cab trip from downtown LA. It is $40 each way, US dollars, and that's before tip. And so you are spending $80 a day just on cabs if you don't use the shuttle to E3. You know, even one way, it's $40 additional a day. That is $120 additional dollars for your trip. That's a lot of money for somebody paying their own way down there. And this is why I start going, is this true accessibility? We think of accessibility in terms of, you know, can we get a wheelchair in there? But there's other kinds of accessibility. And I think that these conferences should be for those young, passionate people, these services that don't have the backing of, you know, a major media company. They haven't been acquired yet, so they don't have those budgets. Those upstart sites should be able to have equal access provided they're accredited. And if we're getting a two-tier system of the people who can afford it and the people who can't, that's not what's best for gaming journalism. It should be the people with the best ideas with the most skill that get the, you know, get the access. And it takes about 3 years to really know how to navigate E3. There are certain sort of unspoken rules and unwritten code that it takes time. There's different quirks at each booth, and there's different sort of booth etiquette at each company. You know, you're not going to approach Atlas the same way you approach Bethesda, the same way you approach EA. You know, they're very, very different systems, and some you can kind of show up and go, hey, can you fit me in? And they'll do it. Bethesda's been really good about, you know, if I don't get everything on a Tuesday, they'll let me come back Thursday in the second half of the day when it's a little slower, and I can mop up the stuff I didn't get before. But, you know, that's not happening at, you know, Activision. That's not happening. If you don't have an appointment with EA, you don't get in. And all your appointment at EA gets you is a lanyard, like a badge, that allows you to stand in a shorter line. And so your, you know, 90-minute appointment, your 2-hour appointment at the EA booth is usually spent standing in line for at least a half hour. 45 minutes if Felicia Day decides to show up and jump the line at the Dragon Age behind closed doors. And then the behind closed doors itself is about 15 to 20 minutes. Sometimes there is gameplay. Unravel was a pleasant surprise because we actually got to go in and play the game. But, you know, you stand in line for 45 minutes because Felicia did bump the line. You get into Dragon Age Inquisition. They do a little presentation. There's no formal questions. It's not what most people would consider an area, an environment that journalism can actually happen in. It's almost a question-averse environment. But that's the reality. Sorry, I had to take a sip of tea there, guys. That's the reality when you're dealing with private companies as opposed to people who taxpayers fund their salaries. You don't have a right to access, and you have to act accordingly. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was the little brief, silly, I thought was going to be fun mini interview I did with Mark Barley from Able Gamers. And I've been experimenting with this with dialogue options and with the party chatter stuff, whether the teasers help or just create a black hole in the schedule, because they don't do especially well on their own, but they do make the traffic for the actual interview come faster, I've discovered, especially when it's the party chatter format and people may not necessarily know why they should care about this particular gamer. If they've sort of had a week to prime and go, oh, I kind of know who this is now, they're more likely to sample it faster because it's a known commodity, right? For in case you're curious, one of the challenges with these long form interview series is they're slow to build. And so they get, 4,000, 5,000 views and building within a few months. But a publicist doesn't see that. They check in 24 hours, 48 hours after an interview airs, and if the traffic's not there, they don't care what it gets 3 months from now. They want the sizzle in the period that they're tracking, and that's usually, if you're lucky, it's a month before the game comes out. But that's the only time you really get these access to these developers, unless you're friends with them, which you're not supposed to be, because then it's considered collusion. So our hands are really tied in terms of developer access in this way. And the scope of the interviews tends to be limited in its own right as well. Like, they like to focus on the current project. And you can get in a few questions about other stuff past work. But a smart interviewer asks the I'm behaving, aren't I good questions first, so that they know, okay, we've done our due diligence now. And then once you've asked a couple of those questions that are actually about the current product, then you get in and ask the stuff that, people are actually really curious about, which is usually past stuff. And a lot of interviewers do it the other way. They ask the questions they want to ask first and then leave the housekeeping to the end. The problem with that is you don't get answers that are as good. And people do it that way because if they get cut off on the interview, they've asked the questions they want to ask. You're supposed to, ask questions in priority, because if you get cut off, hey, you got those asked. But I like working with companies that know me. They know I'm a good interviewer, and they will give me my 20 minutes. And so I ask the questions that they're there to answer. So then the interview subject relaxes and they become more candid in the interesting stuff afterwards. Because at the end of the day, you want the best content out of your interviewer. We are in an age of such adversarial journalism, such gotcha journalism, that there's this perception that good journalism means arguing with your subject. No, there's a lot of similarity between an interview, a press interview, and a police interrogation, where the sort of stereotype is, tell the truth, why are you lying to the public? But a good interviewer, whether in the press or in the police, actually makes the person comfortable. So they feel like they're talking to a friend, not talking to somebody who's going to take this information public. And you get better stuff in both spheres if you keep the pressure down. Now, it's very hard to keep the pressure down at a venue like E3. And it's also very hard to keep the pressure down in a venue like YouTube. And this is a difficulty with getting people to do these interviews. They don't want the negatives. They don't want one little thing they said to blow up and cause a whole big headache for them. And so they're very cautious, and they're definitely cautious about doing anything live. Game companies prefer you to submit your questions by email, and then they get back to you. And the problem with that is it's very hard to ask a follow-up with any flow, right? But, trying to get an hour with somebody is very, very difficult because too much can go wrong. And a PR person's first job is to avoid negatives. Their second job is to get positives. And because in games, one negative can ruin the PR cycle for a game. Everything's so negative focus that it's a real challenge for PR people. And I understand that. And so I get really annoyed when somebody like Mark Barley comes on to do an interview with me so we can talk about disability advocacy, because this is something that is really near and dear to my heart, making things more accessible. And I believe that it's not about lecturing people. It's about allowing disabled people to be seen as people and allowing them to come on and tell their point of view. I had a great conversation with Robert Kingett, who I had no idea who he was. It turns out he's a great guy, and we've been chatting a lot since. He's got a great dating blog that is just hilarious. I actually suggested he check out David Sedaris because he reminds me so much of him in his writing style. But I feel my job is not to set a narrative for someone. I believe my job is to let you guys see these people being interviewed, whether they are, a gamer, a civilian, for lack of a better term, or whether there's someone involved more professionally in the video game industry. I think my job is to let you see the human side of these developers and gamers, as well as impart information. But we can't do that. We can't have that sort of relaxed, friendly discussion if people are going to keep bringing up old nonsense in the YouTube comments. There's a point in time where you have to let feuds go. There's a point in time where you have to just Learn to take things on face value. You don't have to like a given person as a person to respect that they may know something about a given topic. And it's really frustrating to see these comments pop up about something, a misunderstanding that happened during a very ugly period in the history of video games, where everybody was yelling at everybody and things were prone to go like off the rails very, very easily, and people were very guarded, and everybody was really jittery, and everybody's freaking out. Nobody behaved especially well. To bring that back when people are trying to have a conversation about something else is not helpful. You're not showing you're a champion of ethics. You're not showing you're a champion of transparency. You're bringing old crap up when people want to move forward. And I know that the commenters that did this, and I'm being deliberately vague because I do not want to perpetuate the junk that was spread. I didn't delete the comments because I thought that would make it worse. So if you want to go back and look, go ahead. I would appreciate if you didn't. I didn't leave the comments because people weren't swearing. They weren't name calling. So I thought it was fair to leave the comments up. As long as the attacks did get sort of personal. They were saying this person is that, as opposed to saying I disagreed with a particular behavior. But, you know, it seemed angry, but it wasn't beyond my threshold of angry. It certainly didn't come anywhere near the very few videos I've turned comments off of because they got horrible. I will consider whether the full length interview will have comments because I don't want this to happen. But you know, there has to be a point in time where those old feuds stop. And it's fine for you to have reservations about somebody. You know, I don't think you're trying to cause trouble when you leave a comment like that. But the reality it does make trouble. It makes trouble for me. It makes it harder for me to get guests when you're bringing up old garbage. You know, feel free to have those reservations. Feel free to bring it up, you know, when you're privately discussing these things. But really consider the chill you're putting on any sort of dialogue in gaming. The thing that everybody claims to want, except for the outrage warriors who just, you know, they want to shut down dialogue, not encourage it. But, you know, consider what you're doing by bringing year-old crap into the present. You're making it fresh for people. So instead of, instead of talking about accessibility and advocacy for disabled gamers, we're talking about this he said, she said conflict from, you know, a few years ago that most people don't even know about. And you get into what? This is news to me. I don't know what this is. And then people repeat the whole thing and they do their, you know, TLDR version, which is never actually accurate. Like, don't summarize a complicated situation like that, guys. It's just, it's not fair to anyone involved. And the thing that annoys me is I asked people to drop it in the comments and they didn't. And that annoys me because open comments are something we all have to work to continue. I'm not doing that alone. You guys have the lion's share of credit for the fact that comments are able to be remained open. And one of the things we have to do is when someone says drop it, not here, drop it. Because there are reasons. And this is a very, very important thing. If we want to keep dialogue open, if we want to keep comments open, I need everyone's help to do that. Okay? That's super important. And I'm going to wrap now because it's been 30 minutes now, and I like to keep it under 30 minutes. I like there being a 2. It's like the $9.99 or the 99-cent thing. If it's 99 cents, it is $1, but it's not $1. You know what I mean? But anyway, happy weekend. See you on Mountain Monday.